They forgot to remind me, so we're starting in the middle of our lesson. I like to blame everybody else instead of myself. That's my fault.
Hello, Chase.
What's ignorance?
Not knowing.
Okay, a lack of knowledge. That's what ignorance is. Now, I had a college professor. They gave me a lesson, one of the few lessons a college professor ever taught me that I actually stuck with me and it was worthwhile. Most college professors are kind of way out there. Not like 8th grade teachers. They're and 7th grade teachers, they're right there. But those college professors, they're way out there. First stage of prejudice is believing. What do you believe? You believe something that's not necessarily true. So in the South, what did they believe? They believed blacks were what?
Property.
Property. They were lower, they were inferior, they weren't very smart. So they believed those things. Okay? So the next step they do is talk. Who do they talk to? They talk amongst themselves. They don't talk to the people they believe something about. They talk to themselves. And they'll say, oh, do you see those black people? They're ignorant. They're troublemakers. They're no good. So then what do? You avoid them. I don't want to be by them because what? Because they're different. I don't want them to rub off on me. So then what do? You exclude them. They can't be part of us. What's the term for that from this chapter? Segregation. Let's keep them separate from us. Then what's the next stage? You assault them. How do you do that? It can be verbal or physical. Definitely emotional. So many blacks begin to what?
Fight back.
No.
Protest.
You can even do this to people. There's a story in school. They got a transfer. 2 boys came into the school. Whenever they went to their classes, they were always holding hands. And instead of talking to the boys, what did everybody do?
Talk
First of all, they started believing something. What did they believe? Oh, they're homosexuals. Because they're holding hands. Boys don't do that. You start talking. Who do you talk to? You talk to your friends. You see those guys? And then say, oh, I don't want to be around those guys. And then when you have a party at your house, you say what? I'm not inviting them. And then you might usually it starts verbally. But But sometimes it escalates to physical, and in this case it did. The boys got beat up. If it goes to the 6th stage, what happens?
Killed.
You kill. It's the 6th stage. And in case of Reconstruction, there were many former slaves that were what? Killed. In this case, the boys weren't killed, but you could say you can kill somebody emotionally just by what you're saying. Because what they didn't know, the ignorance of this school, was the fact that these boys were from the Middle East. In the Middle East culture, it's very common for what? For males to go around holding hands. That's part of Middle Eastern culture. So they jumped to all these stages, went all the way down here already without even talking to the boys themselves. So we do that. You know, I struggle with that when I'm up in North Minneapolis. What's North Minneapolis famous for, or infamous for? Violence, murders, gang activity. So I see a bunch of kids, what? So if I saw a bunch of kids in my neighborhood, I'd what? I'd probably start believing something. They're what? This is a gang. They're up to no good. So I could get all the way down to these stages.
You killed someone?
Okay? No, I've never killed. I've only killed like a few students, and that was in dreams.
Was I in there?
That's a joke, Jerry.
You should go with mine.
So, all of us, this is what we have to fight against. How do you fight this? You know what the opposite is?
No treatment.
The opposite is love. Guess what the stages are? Pretty much the same. Number one, you believe. Instead of believing the worst thing, what do?
You believe the best?
You believe the best thing. Second thing, instead of talking about them, what?
Talk to them.
You talk to them. Third thing, instead of avoiding them, you what?
Include them.
You seek them out. Fourth thing, instead of exclude, you include. Instead of assault them, you encourage them.
What about to kill?
And of course, if you don't kill, it's going to bring what?
Happiness.
Life.
Joy.
Opposite of killing is life. So this is what knowledge can do for you. But again, whose choice?
Yours.
It's our choice. See, back in 1865, they had hundreds of years of believing something. Hundreds of years of saying blacks were inferior. Blacks are only suitable for what? Farm work. That's all they're suitable for. We do the same thing. What if I brought in 5 white guys, all the same height, 5 black guys, all the same height, and I asked you to pick your basketball team? Who would you pick?
The strongest one.
A bit of a brother.
All you knew is they're all the same height, all the same body build. So 5 of them were black, 5 of them were white.
I picked
A lot of people would pick who? They pick the black ones. Why?
Because a lot of famous people are black with basketball.
Because the athletes, they're good athletes. Again, what is that based on? It's believing something that might not necessarily be true. Just like even a tall person. You get a tall person. Well, that person must be what?
Really good.
Good at basketball.
Doesn't even play basketball.
So we make choices like this all the time. But, and you see what happens here though, you get down to here, and groups, what were the groups that did this in Reconstruction times? The K, K,
KKK.
K.
Oh yeah, the
Ku Klux Klan.
The Ku Klux Klan. You know that many of the people in the Ku Klux Klan were Christians? Would call themselves Christians.
Oh.
Because they believe, and if you read in the Bible, there's stuff about slavery. If we read the first reading, I don't know where they got today's first reading at the Mass, because my reading from my daily thing talks about Paul sending back a slave to the slave owner. The slave had run away, and Paul is sending him back, asking the guy that first owned him to be generous for him, because he's like a brother in Christ now. So Paul was talking about slavery. And throughout Scripture, can you see references to slavery? Yeah. And there's references that say slaves should do what to the masters? They should work really hard and do their best. And masters should do what for the slaves? Treat them with justice. Does that mean you don't work them for free? No, you're still going to work them, and they're not getting paid for it, right? That's what a slave means. You get worked, and you do what? You don't get paid. That's what slavery is. So students always say, "Oh, that must mean what school is, right?" You guys are getting paid. What are you getting paid?
Knowledge.
You're getting paid all this knowledge. So you won't be what?
Ignorant.
You won't be ignorant.
Begins with an N.
You won't be prejudiced.
Knowledge begins with an N, right?
Less ignorant. That's your goal every day, to be what?
What?
Less ignorant every day. I want to be less ignorant. I want to learn something today. I didn't learn yet. Didn't know yesterday. I know something today. So you've already learned something today.
Really?
Of course, it's your choice if you're awake during this whole time.
Maddie?
Maddie. What about Maddie?
Standing. What are you
Sleepwalking. Maddie gets
Of
back
course,
to
if
the
you stay
bed.
awake this whole time, we all look at Maggie simultaneously and say,
So you guys being prejudiced on Maddie, huh?
Yeah.
Oh,
What you sleep?
No, we know she sleeps in bed. We know.
yeah, it's not.
Yeah, we know. We know.
I know Mikey does. I see Mikey. We're gonna go. Now we're all gonna play here.
That's why I want that little electrical board. Looking for somebody to develop that and allow it to happen. So all your chairs are wired. I just have to press a button.
Maybe I'll get vibrated.
Woo! Oh yeah, Mr. It works with my dog. Works with my dog. She's got a little collar. I could give you all little bark collars, yeah, but this looks like my dog. I push the wrong button sometimes. All right, let's look at these terms. What's an amendment? They changed the Constitution. They did 3 major changes during Reconstruction. The first one, you guys all said, the 13th Amendment, which freed all the slaves. That means no more slavery, but we know what the southern states did. They what?
Made black.
Like black codes. They set up ways to still keep them in slavery. But they're not supposed to be able to do that. And then they passed the 14th Amendment, which basically, it says it granted them citizenship, but basically it's saying the Bill of Rights apply to everybody. So it applies to the states too. The states can't deny the rights. That's what was happening. So Georgia would pass a law that took away whose rights? The former slaves' rights. And when they passed the 14th Amendment, they're saying Georgia can't what? Georgia can't do that. Okay? This is a law now. Everybody has to obey this law.
Anyone with the name of George?
Okay? Then they passed the 15th Amendment, which is suffrage. You need to know what suffrage means, the right to vote. Those of you not taking notes, you're going to have a hard time on the test coming up. But
Well, wait.
Will we be able to use our notes?
Is this on Google Classroom?
I'm not going to keep posting them on Google Classroom if I don't see people taking notes. If they're only going to rely on me posting them on Google Classroom to take notes,
Sure, interesting. Interesting.
what do you need to see? You just need to know that this is suffrage, which means the right to vote. If you can't see something, you say, Mr. Ed, I can't see what's that last thing say, if it's that important. But see, this is the way they still prevented people from voting. Literacy test, you know what that means?
No.
Before I could vote, I had to take a test that showed that I could what? Read and write. Does that make sense? Makes sense, but the only purpose of that test was why?
So that
Blacks couldn't read.
So blacks couldn't vote because most ex-slaves, what?
Uneducated.
They couldn't read and write. They didn't have a chance to become educated because the white owners didn't want them to be educated. Because if they were educated, they would realize what? How terrible their conditions were. When you're educated, you see injustice.
Just like that in me.
So then they also did this, a poll tax. What's a poll? That's where you guys went last Tuesday in the social hall. Some of you did. How many voted?
I wanted to.
So that's your poll. So they said before you can cast your vote, you had to do what?
take a photograph.
You had to pay some money before you could vote. And again, you could say, well, it makes sense because they need money to pay for all the ballots and paper and stuff like that. They should be able to collect money, right? But again, the whole purpose of it was what?
So that.
And so who didn't vote? Not only blacks, but all poor whites didn't vote either. Because are you going to pay money when you're to vote when you might need that money for food? Then they had the grandfather laws. You know what that means? This law said you can vote as long as your grandfather voted. So again, who's that eliminate? It eliminates all these ex-slaves because their grandfathers were what?
Slaves.
They were slaves, so they never what?
Voted.
They never voted. Sometimes grandfather laws are good because it's saying, well, grandfather law means you get, it's usually meant for a positive thing. So like my children, once they were in Rosemount High School, all my children were grandfathered in. That means what? As soon as one child went to Rosemount, all the other ones what? Were able to go to Rosemount. That's a big deal because I don't live in Rosemount. I live where? North Minneapolis. And Rosemount, for many years, it's tough to get into Rosemount. Why? If you don't live in Rosemount. You know why? Because it's too full. They don't take any transfers in. That's where it would be a good thing. And then the last thing they did was violence intimidation. And that's like the groups of the KKK. So they might come into your house and knock and say, you don't want to go vote tomorrow and have a couple guns there. We know where you live. We know where your children are. You might think twice about voting tomorrow. Even some would just show up at the polls because there weren't necessarily laws about guns. And these people would be at the polls with their guns. And all they have to do is So you sure you wanna come here and vote today? Would that intimidate you?
Yeah, we're not at the army base.
So could Mr. Hell have been up the top and said, you know, if you vote today, I'm gonna take your recess for next week?
I would still vote.
I would not. I know.
My vote matters.
If you vote today,
It's okay, I'm already missing.
you're gonna fail social studies.
Nope.
And it's gonna happen anyway.
No,
It's gonna happen anyway.
Yeah, I'm already feeling so.
What I should've did was this one. What I should've did was this one. right? You vote today, give me some money.
Okay, quarter vote.
that'd be easy with anyone would say.
Give them a penny off the floor.
So the black codes did give them some things, which was good, but the majority of them were meant to discriminate, were meant to keep them in slavery. And then a lot of them passed what are called Jim Crow laws. And Jim Crow laws, that's why you saw the sign on there. So over here, when we have bathrooms, first of all, this school would be either what? It'd be an all-white school, probably this one. Why would this be an all-white school?
What did you want to do?
Because it's in a prosperous neighborhood with prosperous parents. Okay?
140.
Where do the all-black schools go? Poor neighborhoods with poor parents. The Supreme Court ruled in 1896, Plessy versus Ferguson. This historic case you need to know. 1896, Plessy versus Ferguson. The Supreme Court ruled that it's okay. They came up with this doctrine: separate but equal. For schools. Basically, separate means you can what? This went all the way from 1896 until they changed it in 1954. This is saying separate means what? What term? Segregation. So I mean, they're saying it's okay to have separate schools. It's okay to have black schools and white schools. That's okay. But they have to be what? Equal. Now that's impossible to do, because where do schools get their money? You know, our school's tuition, but public school,
Government.
where do public schools get their money?
Government.
They get their money from taxes. Primarily, what kind of taxes, you know?
People taxes.
Property taxes. Property taxes. So who's gonna have a lot more money? What schools are gonna have a lot more money?
Bigger schools.
Schools where the property values are what? High. In rich white neighborhoods. Because in the black neighborhoods, the property values are what? Low. I can go buy a house now for $100,000.
What?
I can't in Rosemount, but I can in North Minneapolis. If I go to a neighborhood that's has lots of crime, gang activity, okay, drug activity. If I go to one of those neighborhoods, I can buy a house for $100,000. Again, is that a lot of money? No, because you can't buy a house in Rosemount for less than $300,000. I'm sure. Most of your homes probably are in the $400,000, $500,000, $600,000 range. You could ask your parents, "What's our house worth?"
Oh, I know.
I'll bet you they'll say that's going to be 400. I would say 400, 500, 600,000.
Or just, I asked them, they'll say it.
Our house was pretty old, so.
Okay.
They say,
Now, eventually, what happened? We said Johnson got in trouble. He got so stubborn that the people said, let's get rid of him. Just like they tried to do with President Trump, right? President Trump has a lot of similarities to Johnson because he's what?
Stubborn.
He's stubborn, okay? Okay?
Oh my gosh.
What do you do when you want to get rid of the president?
Impeach.
Impeach.
He wasn't.
Yeah.
You know what impeach means?
Looks like a peach.
You know what impeach means? You need to know.
It's like unelected president.
Impeach just means to accuse.
Oh.
I thought it was impeach. It can take in
Yeah, peach.
Just means to accuse somebody. All of us. You know when your parents get pulled over for a speeding ticket?
Yeah. My dad got pulled over one time.
You get pulled over for a speeding ticket, you're not guilty. You've just been what? You've just been accused of speeding. Now, if I sign the ticket and pay it, then what?
I'm guilty.
Then I basically said I'm guilty. Here's the fee. But for every crime we have in our country, we have a right to what?
Say I didn't remain silent.
We have a right to go to court and have a trial.
I want to sign it.
So you could go to court and have a trial over a speeding ticket if you want to. Most people don't. Why?
It's too much work.
Not just because it's too much work. It's going to cost more. It's going to cost more to go to trial, hire lawyers and stuff, than it would to just do what? Just pay the ticket. So most people just pay the ticket. Plus, most people know for a speeding ticket they were what? They were guilty. They were speeding. Okay?
Your dad's my lawyer.
So, how's this happen? So they're accused. Who accuses him?
The government. Us.
President Trump and President Johnson. There's only been 3 presidents who have been impeached. That means the first step. 3 presidents have had the first step happen to them. They were accused. Johnson was the first president. William Clinton was the second. And Donald Trump was the third. The House of Representatives votes to say what?
You're fired.
They're accusing you. What they're supposed to be accusing a president is what is called high crimes. But Johnson's problem, and all these presidents, biggest problem was that the House was controlled by who? The other party. So Johnson, who controlled the House?
So does that mean Republicans?
The radical Republicans controlled it. So they voted to accuse him. All it takes is a majority vote.
Yeah.
Now, what happens now? Let's say what happens, I get a ticket, I get accused. What happens if I don't want to fight it? If I want to fight it, what happens?
Go to court.
I go to court. So you have a trial.
I saw this meme called Time to Impeach.
And then
Trump's face.
Okay? Where's the trial for the president happen?
Biden's vice president.
Happens in the Senate.
Look how good I got 2
Yeah.
questions right, Lucy.
The first woman president.
Oh my god. Thank you guys.
Why does it take in the Senate?
No, she's from Hillary Jones.
You guys know
Asia is Indy.
I can't do my pen
Yeah.
game.
This is why no president has been removed from office.
I can't go on the first woman.
What's her name?
I can do it all.
2/3.
Takes 2/3. Who acts as the judge?
This vice president.
This might be an essay question on the test, hint, hint.
Vice president. Vice president. Because they're the head of the Senate.
Tell me how the impeachment process works.
Oh yeah.
They prove that everyone's guilty.
The Chief Justice of the Supreme Court is the judge.
Yeah, she voted for Biden.
Was it?
So they're going to bring the case to the trial at the Senate. And they vote. And it takes 2/3 of the senators to say that he's guilty. And if he is guilty, what happens?
He goes bye-bye.
Okay? Then they're removed from office.
Thank the Lord, Trump.
She always reminds me.
Bella.
And I'll say it again. Yes.
Bella. Biden starts it again. 2021 though.
Yeah, I
So,
know.
3 presidents,
Sadly.
step 1 has happened.
Yeah.
No president has this happened. So no president has ever been removed from office because of crime. Okay?
I know he's.
Johnson's problem,
He's the only.
why he was accused, because basically he was stubborn and was fighting Congress. President Clinton's problem was that he lied about an extramarital sexual thing going on. President Trump's reason, again, is kind of like Johnson. He was what? Stubborn. So he's fighting the House.
Isn't that what Trump's doing right now?
Yeah.
But in each case, the Senate, for Johnson, it came 1 vote. Johnson was the closest president to be removed. 1 vote.
He's moving.
He would have been
He's not
kicked
president.
out.
He lives on the right.
Take out your planners,
He's coming.
write down this.
In Florida?
Well, yeah, he owns businesses and stuff. No, but the thing is, he owns lots of money.
Stop.
Yeah, there's a lot of taxes.
Sit down.
People to pay his taxes with.